Hey everyone, it's Keeping It Real with Nikki and Jim. How are you doing today, Jim?
I'm doing very, very good. It's
Hey,
a
I noticed
beautiful
you have
day
a blue
out.
shirt on today. Thank you for wearing your blue shirt. Do you know
I
why?
did that on purpose.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
It
I
is
saw
Angelman
that.
Syndrome Day, just in case anyone doesn't know, and that's being honored by the blue because Angelman, most people haven't heard of it, and it's such a rare disease that it needs a little bit more recognition. So wear blue shirts on April, or not April 15th, that'd be my birthday, on February 15th, because that's Angelman Syndrome or Angelman Syndrome Day. And we're going to start talking about the market a little bit, right, today? And we have our guest on, and who's our guest?
Uh, Carrie Selby. So
So we're gonna bring her on. Hi,
with
welcome,
Fairway Mortgage.
Carrie.
The usual suspect here, yes.
Yeah,
We so appreciate you coming on every time.
we
Well, yeah,
really
I'd love to
do.
share the information because things change almost daily. So it's important to keep up on the market and what's going on.
Okay, so we're gonna let you go ahead and take it. Tell us what's going on in the market today.
So things were a little less than expected with the CPI report. The numbers came in higher than they were thinking. So that did affect rates a little bit. But historically speaking, we're still so much lower than we've been in the past. The average went about 6.125 to 6.375. This week, they jumped more like to 6.5% national average, which is, like we said earlier, still better than 18, 20% that it was years and years ago. But this graph that I had put into this slide here is just to show nationwide what things are happening how things are happening in the housing market. And you can see in our region, the Pacific Northwest, in that upper left-hand corner, we're slower than a lot of the other parts of the nation. We're still up 38% from last month, but down 62% from this time last year.
Okay.
Okay.
Huh.
I know, right?
Okay, there.
It's a lot of information.
For once, how does that happen? So rates have went up a little bit. I mean, like national average is probably like low sixes, medium sixes, kind of ish, right?
Mid sixes, yes.
Sixes, okay. So it was weird because Jim and I were actually just talking about this on Monday, and we were talking about, I mean, like when I bought my house, I think it was like 7 or 8, actually. I'm just trying to remember back. And then we got it refinanced at like 6, and then we got refinanced at about 3. So, I mean, we've refinanced it a couple times, just kind of over the thing. But when we bought our house, and I'm just, Jim, why don't you tell me? Because you had the same thought I did, and, you said it best. So,
Yeah, I think one of the things about rates, I think people get really locked in, especially because they went down to 2 and 3, which is just historically amazing. So I don't even think we're going to see that again. But when I was looking back at the 5 different houses that I bought, I never bought them because of rates. Wasn't shopping for houses because of rates. I was shopping because of opportunity. My first one, I was renting a house, 800 square foot house, my first one. And the owner called me and said, "Hey, Jim, good news and bad news. Bad news is we got to sell the house. Good news is you're up first if you want to buy it." So I scrambled, got money together, was an FHA loan. Well, it was 10.75%. And yet that percent, I wasn't looking at rates at that time. I was looking because there was an opportunity in front of me. And so the rate just told me, can I afford this? And I think it's really, and I found out that I could. And 5 years later, I sold the house for 112.5. I had bought it for 58. So I almost doubled my money, even though I bought it at a higher rate. So sometimes I would say, look at your opportunities. Is there something in front of you that's going to work? And the only way you're going to know if it's going to work is if you go get pre-approved or pre-qualified and find out how much you can afford. None of the 5 houses that I bought did I know beforehand that I could buy. I had to go see a finance person to really know if I could do that or not. And then when I found out that I could, lo and behold, I was able to buy those houses. And so I guess my encouragement right now is not to just be so focused on the interest rate, because the interest rate doesn't mean anything if you don't tie it to a house or a house price. So my encouragement, especially if you're renting, find out what you qualify for. Then let's say you qualify for a $400,000 house. Then the rates go up. Then you could call somebody like Carrie and say, okay, what does that do to my buying power? Or if
Yeah.
they go down, or if the rates go down, how much more could I afford now? But at least you have something to tie it to.
Absolutely. And that's the important part of getting pre-approved, is finding out how much you're pre-approved for. And the way we do that is based on the current interest rate. And if things change, I'm constantly looking at your file and seeing if I have to adjust the price up or down. And that's the
Right.
benefit of working with a lender that is going to be on
Exactly.
top of things. And you're so right. It's so much about opportunity, because I can do an analysis for you based on the home that you're looking at and what it looks like to rent versus buying, and the break-even point. At first, the mortgage might be a little bit higher, but at about 3 to 4 years, you're going to break even, because housing inflation is going to rise.
Yes.
Your housing payment for a mortgage is going to stay fixed. The only thing that can increase it is going to be your property taxes, but it won't increase at 4% like the average rents will. So I'm always happy to put together an analysis that shows you where your break-even point is and how much equity you can get after you've had your home. Like you said, Jim, you almost doubled your money after 5 years.
Exactly.
That is
Amazing.
pretty normal. That's pretty much the standard.
If I would have waited for the interest rates for 5 years, I would have paid
You would have missed the
112.5
opportunity.
instead of 58. I know those amounts are really low, but it's all relative to our economy.
Absolutely.
That's what they were back then in 85 or whatever it was.
You know,
But,
like we talked about from the very beginning, though, I think from one of our first things, one of my biggest things was that we didn't respond, or, we didn't check into that when we were in California. I mean, when we lived there a long, long time ago, and we didn't check into it. We probably could have. We were just too afraid, I guess, or whatever, to find that out. So
yeah,
anyway,
exactly
okay.
right.
So let's move forward. So we're talking about our buying process right now, and we've had a lot of information on it lately. Jim, do you want to kind of recap what we've been going through, and we'll continue on that path?
Yeah, it's been fun. We're coming down now to closing, and we're going to we'll mention that later, but we're going to have an escrow person on next week, which we're excited about. But that's the final closing. But we've talked about inspections, we've talked about appraisals, we've talked about financing, and there's a number of things right now. Let's say you've signed your purchase and sale agreement, you've come to an agreement on a price. Now you've ordered your appraisal, you've ordered inspections, your financing is going through. There's a lot of things going on, and life is just like that. There's a clock running, right? And it's called the closing date. And so we're trying to get everything done by the closing date. If you've watched Bond movies, have you ever watched those? And there's the world is going to blow up, and they keep showing the clock, so Bond has to go do a bunch of things. Well, yes. This won't be like that.
Our race against time. We're racing to get all those different moving parts put together. Yeah. And that's what our job is. I mean, that's what we've been doing. And we had the home inspection, right? And so the seller's probably frantically trying to get any work orders that they had to get done by the closing date, right? You've had the appraisal, right? And so the appraisers maybe call out conditions, maybe you've had to go back and do some negotiations, but that's getting finished and closed and finished and finalized. We've had title, which we really haven't talked about a whole lot yet. I mean, we talked about them at the beginning that they might be reaching out for some information, but their job this whole time has been trying to making sure the title for the property is clear, no clouds on title. That means there's no liens and nothing unexpected that you wouldn't know about. And again, we'll have our guest next week kind of speak on that just briefly a little bit and kind of go back and hit some more of what kind of things that they might have been looking for. But they're kind of behind the scenes doing that. And then we have our wonderful lender, right?
Yeah, and we're actually working in conjunction.
Trying to tie it all together. So what are you doing?
It does, and that's why it's important to pick the best team, because we're all working together to meet a common goal, and that's your closing date. And once we receive the contract, definitely we're disclosing the loan, we're ordering appraisals. We don't really have much to do with the inspection. We just want to make sure it passes. And if you do have a bond loan, we do need a receipt for the inspection. We don't want to see the report, but we definitely need to show that you had an inspection done. And we are working with title and escrow because we order the title report. We have a closing protection letter. We also receive wire instructions on where the funds should go. And if you are turning in your earnest money, you're also going to need wire instructions. Important part about that is to make sure they come from your escrow company, because wire fraud is rampant. And so it's important to verify that that email was sent to you by your escrow agent. And also, if you're coming in with funds to close, what's that?
I said, we're actually going to talk more about the fraud part of it next week, I think, with our escrow person, because that's such a, I mean, you're right. It's going up so much, and they have a lot of ways that they can help and tips that they can give to help prevent that from happening. Because that's really heard horror stories, and it's like people lose everything, and it can be really sad and a very, so you really do have to be on top of that. So we'll talk more about that next, because there is quite a bit to talk about. So
there's a lot. That's a whole other animal. And I don't even want to broach that subject. I just know what I know about my part. Right. So we'll definitely let the guest speaker touch on all of those wonderful things next week. Another important thing to do when you get under contract is to make sure you're contacting your homeowner's insurance people. Mm-hmm. Talk to the people that you have a car with. Talk to your lender. We have a list of people that we refer, because we work with them and we know that they get us what we need fast, and they get the best coverage for the lowest amount of money for you, because that is also part of your housing payment, is your homeowner's insurance. So we just ask that you call them, get a quote, and ask for that quote to be bound. And then we do the rest of the work for you. We're sending out a binder request with all of our information
on insurance, because I know, a lot of people try to look for the best rates. And I've had other or transactions where somebody's chosen a place in, I don't know, I'm just gonna say Connecticut for some reason, right? I don't know, somewhere east, right? But they've chosen a insurance company to represent them, and the insurance company was coming back with all kinds of really weird requests, because it's so different there than what we have here. Although I know they had to be state regulated and they should know that information, it seems like it was kind of strange. So have you had that experience, or no? Or I don't know. I just usually try to tell my clients to stick local and try to find somebody locally to do that.
I think that is important. You're right, because they know the local environment. They know which areas are going to be in flood zones. We pull a flood certificate ourselves, so we know if it's in a flood zone or not. It requires extra insurance. In California, they require earthquake insurance. It would be odd for somebody here to say, oh, you need earthquake insurance in Washington State, because it's not something that happens on a regular basis here. So definitely, and when the binders come in, I'm looking at the policy, and I can tell you from experience that I've had some that have come in so high, and I just say, do you mind if I give you the number of somebody that can maybe help get a better rate, a better coverage? And I can tell you, on one transaction, I saved somebody probably almost $250 a month, because they required flood insurance. Oh yeah. And flood insurance is very expensive. So the company that I referred them to is a broker. And so she was able to look at multiple companies across the board and got more coverage for way less money.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Yeah. I always like to hear good stories like that.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to see anybody get robbed.
Yeah. That's what we do. We're there to protect our clients, and we really do try to make sure we've got some really, good contacts at our fingertips, and try to do the right thing. So
yeah. And we all have people that, in this business, it's very referral based. And so we know people are asking us for our business all the time. So we have all kinds of insurance companies, escrow companies ask us, we know.
Right.
Because we're a team.
And then people say you're working together, and sometimes the buyers are very leery, because you're getting a kickback, and it's no, we don't get kickbacks. Mm-hmm. We get in trouble if we do something like that. So we really don't, but we do have a lot of experience. I just was on the Nextdoor app. That's where I'm going with this, actually, because they were talking about home inspectors, and they're like, oh, don't ask your real estate people, because they'll just give you a whole buddy, somebody or whatever. I go, no, you really do want to ask your real estate people, because a lot of times I'll refer somebody out, but sometimes the buyer will say, hey, I'm bringing a person in, and that person could be good. And I'll definitely try to use them again. Or they could be horrible and they miss a bunch of stuff. And it's oh, no, you don't want to use this person. So we have that kind of firsthand knowledge about what they miss, what they don't miss. And I would say, ask us. At all times, for insurance, for home inspectors, we can't really control appraisers, but, your repair people, I mean, all that, because
Yeah.
sometimes you can't get into places and you need somebody
Yeah.
like yesterday, and and chances are your real estate person will have somebody in their back pocket that they can go, oh, I have somebody who can get out there.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a very good point. Continue on. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I had to say that.
It's not an interruption at all. I think it's important because it just shows that we have to have a relationship. We're going to talk to each other regularly. And one thing with Fairway as a whole, but that I really emphasize is my Tuesday updates, because there are so many moving parts. I work on a team. I could not do my job without my production partner, Jen. I have a processor, I have an underwriter, we have a closing team. So there's so much going on behind the scenes. And there's documents that we're going to ask your real estate agent to get signed, especially if you're doing a government-backed loan. There's extra disclosures that need to be signed. So we're working in conjunction with your real estate agent as well throughout the process.
And it's so important to have that working relationship with your team though too, and that communication, is huge, because I've been on a couple of things where the lender doesn't communicate, and then you get down to the wire and it's like, what do you mean it's not there? What do you mean it's not happening? And so, I mean, I know I make a lot of calls up through the very end, like, hey, how's it going today?
Yeah. It's important though, because it gets stressful towards the end.
Really
We have
does.
to make sure documents get there and that all parties can sign and be ready by the date that we need to close, so that the funds can be wired, so that escrow can record with the county. Because the goal is to get you your keys. We want you to have your keys by 3 p.m.
Exactly.
We want you to be in your home. It's what you've been anticipating all
And
of
there's
this
always
time.
a hiccup. I mean, like I would say, almost every single one always has a little hiccup. Hopefully small one. It's just like, okay, we need to get this form signed or something, not a big deal. But, there can be some, but the more the communication is, in my opinion, it really does help the whole situation. So back to your side of it again, Carrie. So you're working with your underwriter now at this point, because we're getting to the wire. I mean, we're getting to like where the buyer is almost ready to walk into, to go sign their documents. What's happening on your side of it? What kind of paperwork do you need at the end, or might they be asked for? What is the underwriter doing? Are they completely underwritten at this point? Tell us a little bit about how that process looks on your side of it.
We really try to get the file underwritten within the first 7 days that you're under contract. That is our goal, because things need to move expeditiously, especially if there are things that are called out and we need to gather documentation. Most of the time we're gathering everything that you need up front, but we do need updated things like bank statements and pay stubs. We'll also need copies of your earnest money check, whether it's a wire or a regular check or a cashier's check. We need to have a copy of that, and then a bank statement to show where the funds came from. So things like that are what we're going to be asking for. And the file can be completely underwritten, but be missing an appraisal. So that might be a condition that the closer is going to, or the underwriter is going to ask for. So once we get an approval back, it's going to give us certain conditions. If I'm doing my job up front, the conditions list is going to be very short. So that's the importance of getting things gathered up front during that pre-approval process, so that by the time you're underwritten, our condition list is very minimal.
So
yeah.
Another thing here too. So, it's like, I don't think a lot of buyers, because we were kind of talking, a lot of buyers and even sellers, I don't think they really realize all the moving parts behind the scene. You know what I mean? And so, it's like, oh, I got an email from the lender, I'll get to it tomorrow, or you know what I mean? It's kind of like this, but what they don't understand is you need it to pass it on to your underwriter so that can be done. And then it has to get, after we get that done, there's a deadline to get it to the escrow company. So, I mean, there's a lot of really tight deadlines. And so it's really, buyers, if you really want to help out your team, and that's what we're all team, you really, really want to make sure that you are, on top of it and signing things as needed and stuff like that as soon as you possibly can, because that's how we're going to hit those deadlines. And if you don't hit those deadlines, you're out of contract. So you could blow the whole sale. So it's super important to do that.
100%. And when we have to resubmit for conditions, there is a waiting period. Could be 24 hours, could be 48 hours, depending on how many loans are in the pipeline and how backed up things are. So we need to allow time for those conditions to be cleared. And once they get cleared, we have to submit the loan to get clear to close. Once we get clear to close, it needs to go over to our doc people, and then they need to draw docs, and it's the whole closing package. And work in conjunction with escrow to make sure that our numbers balance, to make sure that the property taxes are being paid correctly, the homeowner's insurance, the reserves for the interest on the loan, because you accrue daily interest. So they make sure all of those things are calculated correctly, so you have the right amount of money to come in with at the closing table. So there's a lot of things happening. And once everything is balanced with escrow, then our closer releases the docs to the escrow company, but then they need time to review the closing package, because they're going in and making sure they're notating where signatures are needed. Because if one signature is missing, it can keep us from going and recording with the county. So they're very vigilant, and they want time to review it. So best practice is to get them their closing package at least 24 hours before the signing appointment. Sometimes it's just hours, and they're so amazing. They work with us because they want people to get into their homes, but we really, best practice is to get them 24 to 48 hours, the closing package.
So the bottom line to our buyers is, please make sure that when you ask for information, or you need to sign something, especially as you're getting close to that closing date, you are on it, right, guys?
Yes. And it can be very overwhelming. People are like, I have to sign another paper. Well, yeah, I'm going to give you $400,000, $500,000. So my big joke is, I said it before, I think during our first one, I'm going to be asking for your social security number, your date of birth, your firstborn child, a sample of your blood. I want all of it. I need everything. I'm going to get very personal and private with you, but it's all to make sure that you get your ultimate dream of being a homeowner.
Yep. And that's really what it's about.
Yeah, that's the best part of my job. I love when people are like, oh, I'm so excited, I got my keys, and I see them posting pictures on Facebook. It's so exciting. I just love that part of it.
Very nice.
Too. Yeah. Yep. All right.
I think the key thing, just in closing for me, was that in the closing of this last house, I was extremely busy at work, and I know that a lot of the buyers are extremely busy. So it's really important that they have a realtor that is really detailed, because the realtor kind of oversees it all. And I kept getting these little pings on my email or my text saying, did you remember to, or we have 2 days to do this, or we have 1 day to do this. Did you sign this? And that was my realtor, checking to make sure that I was doing those things. So very, very important that you have that in a realtor.
Yeah, and I think people kind of just think we sit back and kind of go, "Yeah, we got it. This is all. Everything's just magically. It's like my husband, right? It's like everything just magically happens, and everything. All this other stuff to make this happen.
The cleaning fairy came in and cleaned the house and washed the dishes. And
how did those dishes get done?
I snap my fingers. My transactions. I snap my fingers. It's magically done.
If only.
I know, right? No, it's a lot of calls and and again, going back to communication, that is probably the biggest thing. And that's with all parties. And whether it's the escrow, your lender, your realtor, or the buyer sellers, actually it's all of them, and both realtors, because a lot of times the realtors on the phone talking to others too. And it's, did this get done? Did this get done? How are we going to get this organized? And I mean, there's all kinds of moving pieces that, we're just touching on. And then the final thing that's happening, not only the parties moving or getting ready to make their move, and they're calling their movers, and they're called their insurance people, and they've gotten, all the other stuff that we already talked about today done. Then they're also trying to, I forgot what I was going to say now. I just completely lost my train of thought.
Well, I know what a couple of things. They want internet, they want power, they want water and gas.
Exactly.
Those are all things that people need to set up beforehand.
Exactly.
And so if things don't close on time, that can be a stressor to people, because, oh my gosh, Wave Cable is coming to set up at 2:00 tomorrow, and I don't have keys to the house yet. What am I supposed to do? So these are all things that come up, and why we work so hard behind the scenes, because we know that there are plans set in motion. You have movers coming to your home. You have people coming to set things up for you so that you're ready to move in. So we get it. We're right there with you.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to make it as easy as possible. And,
that's great.
But yeah, there's a lot going on. But it's like we ask you, hey, stop. We need to stop everything you're doing and sign right here. But it's important, and that's how it's all going to happen. So, we understand the buyers are, like you said, very stressed. It's a very stressful time, but they're packing, they're getting all that stuff ready. They're, have to be at closing. There's a lot of stuff to watch out for. And like we'll talk about next week, the fraud part of it too. And, what are some safe things that we can do to make sure that your money stays safe? Because our bottom line is we just need to have a smooth transaction and happy buyers and sellers. So
exactly.
For sure.
Yeah.
So that's all I have for today, since I can't even remember what I was going to say. Thank you for catching me on that one, Gary.
Of course. See, it just shows our relationship and our teamwork.
We think alike.
There you go.
Keeping it real, for sure.
Nice save.
So anyway, thank you all for joining us, Carrie. It's always a pleasure to have you here and helping us out. And
Very
we're looking
much.
forward to next week. It should be a fun way to close it. Oh, I know what the last thing I was going to say. I did remember. See, I knew it'd come around. We also have to do a final walkthrough, and we do schedule that too. And that's also kind of happening in the midst of all this too. I mean, like I said, the packing and the sign, or, before the signing usually, because you want to make sure you have all the stuff done that the home inspector was supposed to have gotten done. We want to make sure that has happened. So, that's also the time that your realtor is going to schedule a final walkthrough, where you get to walk through the property and make sure that, like I said, all the checklist stuff's done, that there's no new holes in the walls, that something wasn't damaged while the the sellers were moving out, for instance. So, a lot of moving parts, lots.
For sure.
So that was my final point. I want to make sure.
Good. I'm glad you remembered
Very
it.
good.
And thank you for having me. I enjoy getting on here and being able to talk about what I'm passionate about. So I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Everyone have a great week, and we will see you back next week for Keeping It Real with Jim and Nikki.
Okay, bye-bye.